Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you for the week 2 feedback video. Richard, another really interesting week and some very valuable insights, I'd say.
Some really juicy content this week, Craig, whether it's the meditation practice, the informal practice, or the stress reduction aspect of mindfulness. So it's generated a lot of great conversation.
Yeah, a lot of really important topics. Now, one of the things to note at the first was we give a little bit of background about the science of mindfulness. A lot of learners found that really helpful and motivating. And I feel very often that that's kind of the what gets the horse to the water. Of course, the real learning about mindfulness is not learning about 100 randomized controlled trials on something or other, but it's actually the practice and the experience. But certainly the science can be quite motivating. The effects on the brain and so on are very useful. One question did come up, though, about can mindfulness really help to reduce overthinking? And I've been thinking a lot about that lately and trying to... and I think one of the things that it can do is it helps us to see the thinking for what it is, to notice it, to make a choice to engage with it or not. But the overthinking tends to be so repetitive, goes over and over things, worries about stuff that's not relevant, etc. And I remember one time a lady, was a course for people with anxiety, and she said practicing mindfulness, and she'd been trying to get rid of the thoughts, which of course is a kind of an exercise in futility very often. And she said she got more the sense of just watching the thoughts, just watching. Yeah. And what she noticed was how repetitive and cyclical and so on. And she said, I lost interest in them. She said, I think I bored myself out of anxiety. I thought it was a really beautiful way to put it.
And it's interesting. It's that ability just to watch them without engaging with them. That's really the fundamental sort of the gift of mindfulness, because we are conditioned to follow our thoughts, whether we react to them or whether we follow them and be interested in them. We're just conditioned to do that. It's just the habit that we have. So the moment we stop doing that and just allow thoughts to be there, we're changing that habit. And like any habit, over time, it's going to get weaker and weaker if we stop feeding it. So
that's right. We have to be aware in the moment to even realize there is that choice.
Yes.
Yeah. So the formal practices come up, and curiosity has been quite a theme too, Richard.
Yeah, it has. And curiosity it's something I'm really interested in when I talk about mindfulness, because it's so fundamental to being mindful. As kids, we're innately curious. One of our learners asked, is curiosity innate? And I think if you go and watch a kid playing, like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, you're going to see a lot of curiosity, because everything's new and fresh and interesting and exciting, and they're just playing in the mud or playing with sticks or really engaging with the natural world a lot of the time with this incredible curiosity. They're interested in ideas, why, and you know how kids are. And it's not that we lose that innate quality, we just kind of lose touch with it. And mindfulness offers us a way of rediscovering that. And I think it's a beautiful gift of mindfulness to start rediscovering this basic sense of being interested in each breath that we take, each moment that we have. Because when we start to bring that type of curiosity and interest, not an intellectual, but more an experiential, childlike curiosity to every moment of our day, we're just much more engaged with the world and the senses and what's actually happening. And of course, we can bring that same curiosity to starting to observe habits of the mind, like the repetitiveness of anxious thoughts or the way our mind habitually grabs hold of things. And once we start to see that, we can, of course, step out of it and work with it more effectively.
That's right. And even when we start to notice a lack of curiosity, the mind going with, oh, I'm bored, oh, what about this? Oh, I've done that before, I've experienced that before. It's just to even be curious about a lack of curiosity and to notice the effect of it. Yeah. That we actually stop experiencing and connecting with things. Because when we do actually authentically connect with something, it's a very different experience to our usual one on automatic pilot when we're not really paying attention. And yes, that curiosity is, I suppose, covered up for kids. They kind of lose it by being around uncurious adults too much of the time, perhaps. Yeah. There's an interesting question this week from a junior doctor talking about not having the time or the space to practice in the midst of a busy working day. And whether you're a doctor or not, many people have busy working days.
Yeah,
And I can remember
of course,
just a
mate,
chip.
in the COVID times, I mean, it must be just frantic on these medical wards with high anxiety and just an overwhelm of work in a lot of places. So
Yeah.
I can understand where questions like this might come from.
Yeah, and I can remember myself as a junior doctor, and I didn't have training in this, but I intuitively practiced what I would now call mindfulness. And if in the midst of a very, very long shift without any breaks and so on, I just realized when I just finished admitting a patient and so on, I could just have a little 5 or 10 seconds to just stop and just sort of in a center myself, I suppose, just reset. And then, like, that's a mini formal practice, if you like, a mini meditation. And then I used to practice that 2-minute walk from one ward to another. It was either 2 minutes of thinking about how many more patients to admit, how many more things to do, why did I even choose this as a career? Oh, I wish I'd done something else. And there was just a 2-minute opportunity to just walk. And I used to just feel the body walking, just noticing people walking down the corridor, saying hello. And what happened was I stepped into the next thing with a calmer, more attentive state of mind. And if I took that attentiveness just moment by moment, one thing at a time, one job at a time, I was actually surprised, even at the very end of some very, very long shifts, I could still feel mentally fresh and clear and actually quite calm and conserved a huge amount of energy. And I think that both the formal and the informal practice of mindfulness really, really important, especially when there's a lot on our plate.
Yeah, and I think that's true for any profession, really. If we insert those moments of just being in amongst all the doing, it does help us just to come back to ourselves and perhaps navigate the day with a little bit less stress or perhaps a bit more focus, as
Yeah,
well as just giving our full attention to whatever we're doing. If we're talking to a patient or if we're writing a document at work, if we give that our full attention, we're just there in the moment and the mind's not getting caught up in all the what ifs or thinking about how tired we are or how much work we've got to do. We're just doing the work, and it's probably in the end a much healthier and quite possibly more productive way of going through the day, isn't it?
that's right. Because when you've got really, complex things, cognitively challenging things to do, then keeping the simple moments simple of just walking, just having a bite to eat or a glass of water and so on, really helps to reduce that mental load, which I think is very important. A lot of learners have been saying about how valuable they've been finding the informal practice of
Mm.
mindfulness, walking, making tea or coffee, etc.
I mean, everything can be a mindfulness practice, can't it? Making tea. I mean, it doesn't have to be a tea ceremony necessarily. It can just be boiling the kettle, but just waiting, taking a few breaths while the kettle boils, or perhaps really sipping and tasting that tea or that coffee or whatever it is that we're drinking there. Some learners talked about the importance of turning off podcasts and music and sources of stimulation. And this is a really interesting one. I mean, I'm noticing at the moment as COVID and the Melbourne lockdown just drags on and on, there's a sort of a disquiet in me somewhere deep down. I'm wanting to watch a lot more. I don't tend to watch a lot of screens these days, but I've just discovered a show called Alone on the SBS. It's survivalist. I don't know if you've seen that, Craig, but it's a fascinating program anyway. And I'm just wanting to watch it and fill all my time with watching this show. And I'm like, you know what? There's something here that I probably need to look at that I don't want to be with, that I'm wanting to bombard myself with stimulation. And when I stop and just feel in, I'm like, yeah, okay, I just feel, I mean, just mildly sort of agitated, about the situation we're in. So it's really important to take that time away so that we can fully engage with what we're doing, so that we can be fully curious about each moment that we're in, but also so that we can notice what's underneath. For a lot of us these days are addicted to screens and addicted to stimulation. And like any addiction, it's good to step out of that sometimes. And if you can, look a little deeper and see what's underneath that.
Yeah, because I think many people have noticed that filling, the ears with stuff, podcasts all the time and so on, is a way of kind of distracting and not noticing. It's a
Yeah.
kind of a way of numbing
Yeah.
anything we're noticing, anything we're not comfortable with. And it's a really valuable insight and noticing the rest that can just come with keeping simple moments simple. The stress reduction side of things has been interesting this week, and learners commenting on dealing with what is rather than what if, because the
Mhm.
mind can come up with about 1,000 what ifs for every what is. and just dealing with what is enough. But fighting with the
More
phantom,
than enough.
yeah, well, and fighting with the phantoms of our imagination. I mean, we try and slay one phantom, and our mind comes up with another. What if? Well, have you thought of this? Well, what about that? And that could happen. And it's kind of endless and exhausting, but it distracts us from what is.
Hmm.
The things that we can actually, and we can only ever actually respond to what's in front of us now. We can never deal with the what if. We can deal with the what is in front of us. Now, that might be preparing for something, but preparing is different to worrying about something. And so self-criticism and judgment has been another kind of habitual pattern of mind that a number of learners have noticed too.
Yeah, well, it's what's been great is how many learners have been noticing the sources of stress rather than assuming that it's in the environment and it's external. They've been looking within and saying, hang on a sec, maybe, getting caught up in the what ifs or the judgments or the self-criticism or the rumination. All of these things are driving that stress response. And it becomes obvious when we're in that because we notice the changes in the body and that alerts us to what our mind is doing. So it's been great to see this growing insight and in some cases the ability just to notice that and step out of it and come back to, as you said, the what is. And one of our learners asked, if we create stress in our minds, can we eliminate the unpleasantness or the stress by changing our thoughts? Do we change our thoughts? And this is an interesting question because it strikes at the heart of what mindfulness really is, and perhaps the difference between something like mindfulness and, positive thinking or cognitive behavioral therapy. And the point is not to change our thinking, because then we're still taking those thoughts seriously. A thought goes through the mind, life's too hard or this moment sucks or whatever it is. And we grab hold of that thought. And then if we start to try and change it or question it, we're still engaging with the thought. Whereas if we just notice it, okay, there's a thought going through the mind and we don't necessarily have to do anything with it, that offers up a lot of freedom. We could choose to follow the thoughts that are useful and just let the other ones go through to the keeper. And in the meantime, we can choose to focus our attention where we really want it to be. So it's not about changing thoughts, Craig. It's about learning to step back from thoughts, to observe them in the mind, and to choose whether or not we engage with them.
Well, that's right. And because when something's there, it's there. But the amplifying effect that the mind can have by the way that we perceive things, the way that what we project onto things. And when we stop doing that, then things just become what they are, and it's something to deal with, something to respond to. Pain or anything we find uncomfortable mentally or emotionally, the sensation is one thing, but what we add to it can amplify it enormously, what we project onto it. When we stop doing that, it is what it is. If it needs a response, it needs a response, but we don't turn things into bigger burdens than they have to be. And that's a tremendous relief, especially when we're dealing with challenging events. Again, coming back to it, what is a lot easier to deal with than what if. And so it's been a very rich week for our learners, and hopefully learners will dive deeply into week 3. We're looking at things like multitasking and how can mindfulness help us to improve performance, and the big 4 cognitive practices, which will take our understanding perhaps of the processes behind stress and how mindfulness can help to a whole different level. So I look forward to being with everybody next week, and have a very mindful week.
Yeah, see you then.